Welcome to Compact History from compacthistories.com, where we explore the stories, events, and moments that shaped the world. In short, bite-sized episodes. This is episode 135, The History of Curry. The history of curry begins with an important qualification. Curry was not originally a single dish with a fixed recipe. The word now covers an enormous range of foods, including thin broths, thick gravies, dry spiced preparations, and slow-cooked stews. Many of the communities that created these dishes had their own names for them, and did not think of them as members of one culinary category. Curry would emerge much later as a convenient but often misleading label. Archaeological evidence shows that people in South Asia were combining aromatic ingredients thousands of years before the word curry entered European languages. At Farmana, a settlement of the Indus Valley Civilization in what is now Haryana, researchers examined starch grains preserved on ancient cooking equipment and human teeth. They found evidence of ingredients including turmeric, ginger, and aubergine. The settlement was occupied between approximately 2600 and 2200 BC, suggesting that complex mixtures of spices and vegetables formed part of South Asian cooking more than 4,000 years ago. These findings do not prove that the inhabitants ate curry in its modern sense, but they reveal some remarkably familiar foundations. The agricultural societies of the Indus region cultivated wheat, barley, pulses, and sesame, while cattle, sheep, and goats provided meat and dairy products. Cooking methods probably included roasting, boiling, and simmering ingredients in pottery vessels. Spices were not simply added to disguise poor quality food, as is sometimes claimed. They supplied flavor, color, and aroma, while certain ingredients also helped preserve food or formed part of traditional medical practices. As settlements and trade networks expanded, ingredients moved between different parts of the subcontinent. Turmeric and ginger flourished in warmer regions, while black pepper became closely associated with the southwest coast. Coriander, cumin, mustard, fenugreek, and asafoetida entered countless local combinations. Cooks learned to toast, grind, and fry spices, producing different results from the same basic ingredients. Ancient religious and medical texts provide further evidence of a sophisticated food culture. Ayurvedic traditions classified foods according to their perceived effects on the body, while religious customs influenced the preparation and consumption of meat, vegetables, grains, and dairy products. These principles varied considerably between regions and communities. There was therefore no moment when someone invented curry. Instead, generations of cooks developed ways of combining locally available foods with spices and aromatic plants. Geography, climate, religion, trade, and agriculture all shaped the results. As South Asian societies became increasingly connected, these early cooking traditions developed into a remarkable collection of regional cuisines. The Indian subcontinent contains mountains, river plains, deserts, forests, and thousands of miles of coastline. Its climate ranges from the dry conditions of Rajasthan to the heavy monsoon rains of Bengal and Kerala. These differences determined which crops could be grown, which animals were raised, and how food was preserved. As a result, the dishes were later grouped together as curries developed along numerous separate paths. In northern India, wheat breads such as roti and naan became important accompaniments to meat, vegetables, and pulses. Dairy products were widely used, with yogurt, milk, butter, and ghee adding richness or acidity. Cooks employed cumin, coriander, cardamom, cloves, and cinnamon, although everyday meals were generally simpler than the elaborate dishes served in wealthy households and royal courts. Rice was more prominent across much of southern and eastern India. Southern cooks made extensive use of coconut, tamarind, mustard seeds, curry leaves, and lentils. Some dishes contained coconut milk, while others were thickened with ground coconut or pulses. The word curry is generally connected to the Tamil word kari, referring to a sauce, relish, or spiced preparation. Europeans would eventually apply a version of this term far more broadly than Tamil speakers did. Regional distinctions extended far beyond a simple division between North and South. Bengal developed dishes based on freshwater fish, mustard oil, and combinations such as panchphoron, a mixture of 5 whole spices. In Gujarat, strong vegetarian traditions encouraged inventive uses of lentils, beans, and vegetables. The limited water and fresh produce available in parts of Rajasthan encouraged the use of dried ingredients, dairy products, millet, and long-lasting pickles. Along the western coast, seafood, coconut, and souring agents featured prominently. Religion and social custom added further layers of variation. Many Hindu communities followed vegetarian diets, although practices differed according to region, caste, and family tradition. Jain cooks avoided meat and, in many cases, root vegetables. Muslim communities developed distinctive meat dishes and brought their own dietary requirements. Food also marked festivals, life events, social rank, and membership of particular communities. Political change introduced additional influences. The Delhi Sultanate and later the Mughal Empire connected northern India more closely with Persian and Central Asian culinary traditions. Court kitchens refined techniques involving slow cooking, marination, nuts, dried fruit, yogurt, and fragrant spices. Preparations such as korma, a form of braised meat or vegetables, became associated with Mughal-influenced cuisine. These courtly dishes existed alongside regional home cooking, rather than replacing it. By the end of the 15th century, South Asia already possessed a highly diverse food culture. The arrival of European ships in the Indian Ocean would introduce ingredients from an entirely different part of the world. Some of them would eventually become so familiar that Indian cooking without them now seems almost unimaginable. When Portuguese navigator Vasco da Gama reached the southwest coast of India in 1498, he entered a trading system that had existed for centuries. Indian, Arab, Persian, African, and Southeast Asian merchants already exchanged pepper, cinnamon, cardamom, cloves, and other valuable goods across the Indian Ocean. The Portuguese came seeking direct access to this trade, but their ships also carried plants that had recently reached Europe from the Americas. The most influential of these was the chili pepper. Before its arrival, South Asian cooks created heat with ingredients such as black pepper, long pepper, ginger, and mustard. Chilies grew successfully in Indian conditions and could produce a powerful flavor at a relatively low cost. Farmers cultivated numerous varieties, while cooks adapted them to local dishes. Over time, chilies became central to many regional cuisines, although their importance still varies considerably. Tomatoes, potatoes, cashew nuts, papayas, and other American crops also entered South Asia through Portuguese-controlled trading networks. Their adoption was gradual rather than immediate. Tomatoes eventually became a common source of acidity and body in many northern gravies, while potatoes were incorporated into snacks, vegetable dishes, and meat preparations. None of these ingredients had been available to India's ancient or medieval cooks. Portuguese rule in Goa produced direct culinary exchanges. One important example was carne de vinha d'alhos, a Portuguese preparation of meat preserved or marinated with wine and garlic. Goan cooks adapted the dish using vinegar, local spices, and chilies, creating what became known as vindaloo. Traditional Goan vindaloo was commonly made with pork and did not depend upon extreme heat. The very hot restaurant version familiar in Britain developed much later. Culinary exchange was not confined to Europeans. Indian merchants, religious Indian travelers and migrants carried ingredients and techniques throughout the Indian Ocean. A study of stone grinding tools from the Archaeological complex in southern Vietnam found traces of turmeric, ginger, cinnamon, nutmeg, clove, and other aromatics dating from nearly 2,000 years ago. The discovery demonstrates that long-distance spice exchange was influencing Southeast Asian cooking centuries before European colonial expansion. Southeast Asian cuisines nevertheless developed according to their own ingredients and methods. Thai gaeng, Malay and Indonesian gulai, and other sourced dishes often used fresh aromatic pastes, coconut milk, lemongrass, galangal, or shrimp paste. The English word curry would later be attached to many of them, even though their histories were not identical. By the 17th century, spices, crops, and cooking techniques were moving through increasingly international networks. European merchants encountered a bewildering variety of South Asian dishes. British traders would respond by reducing that diversity to a single convenient category, turning curry into both a food and an imperial idea. The English East India Company was founded in 1600 and gradually established trading posts, armies, and political control across the Indian subcontinent. Company employees encountered regional cuisines through Indian cooks, servants, merchants, and households. Many developed a taste for spiced dishes, but British descriptions rarely preserved their full complexity. Instead, numerous preparations were grouped together under the name curry. The term probably reached English through the Portuguese word caril, itself connected to the Tamil curry. By treating curry as a single type of dish, Europeans created the impression that Indian cuisine relied upon one standard sauce or spice mixture. Indian cooks generally selected and balanced individual spices for particular recipes. There was no universal Indian substance called curry powder. A distinctive Anglo-Indian cuisine developed within colonial households. Indian cooks adjusted local dishes to suit British employers, while British residents combined ingredients and garnishes drawn from different regions. Some recipes used less chilli, more meat, or unusually thick sauces. Other dishes merged English and Indian traditions. Mulligatawny developed from the Tamil words for pepper water, while kedgeree was adapted from khichdi, a dish based on rice and pulses. Returning officials, soldiers, and merchants carried these tastes back to Britain. Hannah Glass's influential cookbook, The Art of Cookery Made Plain and Easy, first published in 1747, included a recipe titled To Make a Curry the India Way. It used chicken, onions, turmeric, ginger, and pepper. By the late 18th century, British businesses were selling pre-mixed curry powders, allowing households to reproduce a simplified flavour without buying and grinding numerous spices. Curry entered British homes, clubs, and dining rooms, although it remained closely associated with empire. Recipes appeared in domestic cookbooks, usually alongside rice, pickles, and chutneys. Commercial manufacturers produced curry powders with standardized combinations of turmeric, coriander, fenugreek, cumin, and other spices. These mixtures were British products inspired by Indian cooking rather than accurate representations of a single Indian tradition. In 1810, Sakaddin Mohammed opened the Hindustan Coffee House in London. It served Indian dishes and offered hookah smoking in surroundings designed to appeal to former colonial employees. Although Mohammed soon faced bankruptcy, the establishment is recognized as London's first Indian restaurant. By the 19th century, curry had acquired two parallel identities. In South Asia, diverse regional dishes continued to evolve under their own names. In Britain, curry had become a marketable category, defined by cookbooks, restaurants, and packaged powder. The expansion of European empires and the movement of South Asian workers would carry both ideas around the world. During the 19th century, colonial governments moved large numbers of Indian labourers across the British Empire. The system expanded after slavery was abolished in most British colonies during the 1830s. Workers travelled under contracts of indenture to plantations and construction projects in Mauritius, the Caribbean, Fiji, Malaya, East Africa, and South Africa. They carried religious customs, cooking knowledge and seeds with them, adapting familiar dishes to unfamiliar surroundings. In Trinidad and Guyana, Indian culinary traditions combined with African, European, Chinese, and indigenous influences. Flatbreads, pulses, and spiced meat or vegetable dishes became established parts of Caribbean cuisine. Local cooks used available ingredients to create distinctive preparations such as curry goat, curry duck, and curried chickpeas. These were not copies of food from India. They were new regional cuisines shaped by migration and colonial conditions. Indian labourers began arriving in Natal, now part of South Africa, in 1860. Their descendants developed a rich South African Indian food culture centred particularly on Durban. One famous creation was bunny chow, a hollowed loaf filled with curry. Its precise origin remains disputed, but it became closely associated with working-class Indian communities during the 20th century. Curry also travelled through British influence without large-scale Indian settlement. Japan encountered European-style curry during the Meiji period, when the country was rapidly adopting Western technology and military practices. The Japanese version was based partly on the thickened curry stews associated with Britain rather than directly upon Indian regional cooking. Served with rice, meat and vegetables, curry raisu became an inexpensive and filling meal. It was used by the Japanese military and later spread through schools, restaurants and domestic kitchens. Japan's Ministry of Agriculture notes the traditional connection between naval curry and attempts to provide sailors with a more balanced diet. In Britain, Indian restaurants expanded slowly during the early 20th century, initially serving sailors, students, political activists, and former colonial officials. Post-war migration transformed the industry. Many restaurant owners and workers came from Sylhet, a region that became part of Bangladesh in 1971. They adapted menus for British customers, often using a common sauce base to produce dishes with different flavours and levels of heat. Names such as korma, madras and vindaloo took on specifically British meanings. Madras became a standard hot curry despite not referring to one established dish from Chennai. Vindaloo was made progressively hotter, moving far from its Goan origins. By the 1970s and 1980s, curry houses had become familiar features of British high streets. Migration had therefore changed curry again. It could express cultural continuity, provide migrant families with economic opportunity, and absorb local tastes. Having travelled through imperial networks, it was now becoming part of the national cuisines of countries far beyond South Asia. By the late 20th century, curry occupied an unusual position. It remained an umbrella term applied to many South Asian dishes, but it also described separate culinary traditions in Britain, Japan, the Caribbean, Southeast Asia, and elsewhere. These cuisines shared historical connections, yet each had developed its own ingredients, techniques, and expectations. The British curry house became one of the clearest examples. Bangladeshi restaurateurs created menus that customers could understand, offering familiar proteins in sauces identified by names such as korma, buna, Rogan Josh, madras, and vindaloo. The dishes did not always correspond closely to preparations bearing those names in South Asia. They formed a recognizable British restaurant system designed for speed, consistency, and a range of preferences. Chicken tikka masala became a symbol of this hybrid cuisine. It combined pieces of grilled, marinated chicken with a rich tomato-based sauce, but its exact inventor and place of origin remain uncertain. Several restaurants have claimed it, and stories connecting its creation to Glasgow have often been repeated without decisive evidence. Its importance lies less in identifying one inventor than in showing how cooks responded to customers and transformed existing ideas. Other British regional developments included the Balti, closely associated with Birmingham from the late 20th century. Restaurants served quickly cooked dishes in thin metal bowls, accompanied by naan or other breads. Curry also entered pubs, workplace canteens, school menus, and supermarket aisles. Frozen meals, jars of sauce, and microwavable rice made it possible to prepare a version at home with little time or specialist knowledge. Meanwhile, changing migration patterns introduced diners to a broader range of regional cuisines. Restaurants increasingly identified their food as Punjabi, Gujarati, Goan, Keralan, Sri Lankan, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, or Nepalese, rather than relying solely on the generic description Indian. This helped challenge the assumption that all South Asian food belonged to one category. Brick Lane's Bangladeshi-owned restaurants remain an especially visible part of Britain's migration history. Outside Britain, Japanese curry blocks, Thai curry pastes, and Indian spice mixtures became international supermarket products. Chefs and home cooks continued to create new combinations, sometimes following family traditions, and sometimes borrowing freely across cultures. Questions about authenticity followed, but culinary history shows that exchange and adaptation have always been part of curry's development. Curry is therefore best understood not as one ancient recipe, but as a collection of related histories. Its story includes early South Asian spice mixtures, regional cooking, maritime trade, empire, forced and voluntary migration, commercial manufacturing, and modern restaurant culture. The name may be imprecise, but the foods gathered beneath it reveal how people carry traditions with them, adjust to new circumstances, and create something distinctive in the process. That brings us to the end of this episode of Compact History, part of the Compact Histories Network. Please don't forget to follow or subscribe wherever you are listening so that you don't miss any future episodes. And consider leaving us a rating or a review, as it really helps new listeners find the show. You can find new episodes at compacthistories.com, where you can also explore our other podcasts covering biographies, warfare, science, mysteries, true crime, and disasters. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest. Finally, please consider supporting the show directly by buying us a coffee. Head on over to compacthistories.com/history and click on the coffee cup to see how. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.